Thank you. You may be seated. Advocate Adila Hassan.
Thanks, Justice Mataneke. I'll be handing over to my colleague, Ms. Steyn, for this cross-examination.
Ms. Steyn.
Thank you, Justice. Good afternoon, Ndlovu. My name is Nikki Steyn, and I'm one of the representatives of 58 families who lost their loved ones during this tragedy. Mrs. Ndlovu, you testified earlier that approximately 60% of the mental health care users were transferred with their medical files. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct, Counsel.
And you said that approximately half of them were transferred with contact details for their families. Is that correct?
It's correct, Counsel.
And finally, you said that about 70% of them had identity books or identity numbers with them. Is that correct?
Correct, Counsel.
Okay, so the mental health care users were being transferred into your care at Cullinan. Is that correct?
Yes, Counsel.
And your responsibility at Cullinan is to ensure that they would properly be cared for.
Yes, Counsel.
In order to care for them properly, you needed some basic information about these patients.
Yes, Counsel.
And that included things like family contact details.
Yes, Counsel.
It included their medical history.
Yes, Counsel.
It included the confidence that you had the medicine that they needed and all the prescriptions for that medicine going forward.
Yes, Counsel.
Mrs. Ndlovu, was it not then unreasonable to take those patients into your care when you didn't have that information and you knew you couldn't properly care for them?
Remember, Nikki, I've mentioned that things were not working accordingly.
Let's keep to counsel, right? Let's keep to counsel. You can do first names out of the hearing, okay?
Counsel, I've alluded previously that the process was not smooth of the removal of patients.
The process was not smooth. We understand, Mrs. Ndlovu.
Yes.
Do you agree with me, though, that it was unreasonable to accept those patients knowing that you couldn't care for them?
I somewhat differ with you, Counsel. I somewhat differ with you because we've tried our best to admit psychosis patient, schizophrenic patients, of which it was not the patients of our criteria, but we did our best.
So, Mrs. Ndlovu, Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center did not ordinarily admit patients with psychosis.
We don't have, previously, we were not having patients with psychosis or schizophrenia in the institution. That was our first patients to admit.
So because of the pressure of the Life Esidimeni, the Gauteng Mental Health Marathon Project, Cullinan, for the first time, took on patients with schizophrenia and with psychosis.
Yes, Counsel.
Even though you had no experience in treating these patients.
Yes, Counsel.
And even though you didn't have the capacity to treat these patients.
Yes, I can say yes, Counsel. I said initially, the initial plan was for a multidisciplinary team of Cullinan to go to Life Esidimeni and assess the patient before they can be admitted in the institution. But the plan was not executed. Why? I don't know. We were not informed about that. The only day that we were told to go and fetch the patients, it was on the 9th. We were told that on the 10th we'll be going to Life Esidimeni to collect patients. And it was only 10 patients. And according to our knowledge, we were going to receive the patients that are relevant to our criteria. But to our surprise, when we get there, we were forced to take more than what we have expected.
Moving on to that issue, Mrs. Ndlovu, you testified earlier and again now that you were forced to take 26 patients.
Yes.
We've just heard now that some of these were patients with illnesses that Cullinan had not previously taken.
Yes, Council.
And you testified earlier that, in fact, it would be against the interests of these patients to admit more than 10.
Yes, Council.
You didn't refuse to take these patients.
Our first day in Life Esidimeni, that we were in Randfontein, we refused to take more than 10 patients. But there was a telephone communication between our CEO, Salome Mashile, and Dr. Manamela. Then our CEO said to us, after the communication, please just come with whatever that they give to you. Because I've communicated with these people. I told them that we cannot admit more than we are expected to admit, but just because they are forcing, please just take whatever they are giving you. Then that's where 26 patients were loaded in the bus, and we, on our way back to Cullinan, we were calling for them just to make sure that when we arrive there, there's food for the patients, there's beds for the patients. That was it.
Thank you. Mrs. Ndlovu, you said earlier that you were asked by the CEO to take the patients, and that when you got there, you were forced to take the 26 patients. Was it,
Yes.
Was it Dr. Manamela who forced you to take those 26 patients?
Dr. Manamela was not in the premises at Randfontein Life Esidimeni facility. When we arrived there, it was Salome Mashile and Frida Senelo.
And those were the people who forced you to take the patients?
Yes.
Mrs. Ndlovu, later on in your evidence in chief, you stated that you discharged people from Cullinan to make space for patients coming in from Life Esidimeni.
Yes, Council.
You stated that you also discharged former Life Esidimeni patients to other NGOs, Anchor and Sia Badinga.
Yes, Council.
You spoke to us about the discharge procedures that need to be followed,
Yes, Council.
and that those are necessary for the protection of patients.
Yes, Council.
And yet you didn't follow these.
With contacting of families for the patients that we did receive the contact details, we tried our best to call to inform them. Remember when the patients arrived at Cullinan on the 10th, the following day, we called the families for the patients, those who have the contact details. We called the families and informed them that your beloved ones are now placed in Cullinan. For those whom we found, we've informed them. But for those whom we didn't have the contact details, it was unfortunate. And the same procedure happened when we discharged the patient from CCRC to the 2 NGOs. We called the families to inform them that the patients are being discharged from Cullinan to Anchor or Siabadinga. But with our patients, the one that were in Kalinen, before we can take life Esidimeni patients, we had three meetings with the families to inform them about the discharge of the patients from Kalinen, our initial patients from Kalinen to Siabadinga. Most of them, they went to Siabadinga.
But those contact details, the families whose contact details you had not yet found, would not have been part of those meetings. Is that correct?
Come again, Council?
Mrs. Ndlovu, you said that you didn't have contact details for all of the families.
For all of the families.
Is that correct?
It's not correct. What I'm saying is that, Council, we had patients in Kalinen before this process of life Esidimeni. Those patients were discharged from our institution to Siabadinga to make space for life Esidimeni patients. And we had again to discharge the ones that we received from life Esidimeni to our institution, from life Esidimeni to our institution, and discharge them from our institution to NGOs. I'm saying for the patients that we did have the contact details of the family, we informed them about the movement of the patients.
And for those that you did not have contact details, you didn't inform them?
No.
Okay, thank you.
The answer is yes.
For the families that we didn't have contact details, we discharged the family, we discharged the patients without contacting the family, because a challenge was we don't have where to find them.
Yes, that's much clearer. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mrs.
you,
Ndlovu.
Judge.
Thank you, Justice. Mrs. Ndlovu, you also testified earlier that there was no professional staff to assess and look after patients who were discharged from Kalinin to Siabadinga and Anchor.
Yes,
correct?
Council.
And yet you still allowed for the discharge of these patients.
Yes, we continued, Council.
And the reason for that was that Anchor and Siabadinga had more space.
Yes, Anchor and Siabadinga had space. We started our discharges with Siabadinga before Anchor can come in. Anchor came in. I started knowing Anchor on the 23rd of June 2016, of which we were already started with our process of discharging patient from our center to Siabadinga.
Because they had space to take the patients.
Yes, Council.
And so that was your primary criterion, was the issue of where there were beds to sleep in for patients.
Yes, there were beds in Siabadinga. Before we discharged the patients to Siabadinga, we went and checked if anything that the patient can need is there. There were beds, there were blankets, there were food. We were even taken to where they store their groceries. Even on their room refrigerator, there was food, enough food for the patient in Siabadinga.
But there were no professional staff.
During our first batch with Siabadinga, we were told that there is a nurse, of which after some days, that person, we thought that it's not a nurse, it's a caregiver. Because I remember there was this other day whereby a matron was explaining the medication to the person. Then that madam was like, oh my goodness, Tegrotol. What is that? Tegrotol, Respidal. That was what we have seen when we were.
But the bottom line is that there was no proper nurse there.
According to our perception, that person was not a nurse. Because if you are a nurse, you will know the medications of the patients. Our worry was like starting from there. How can, I remember the matron asked me on our way back, Daphne, have you heard what I heard? Then I said, yes, ma'am. That person was like amazed when she was explaining the medication to her. She seemed to be not understanding and knowing the names of the medication, but we kept on discharging the patient to those people because of the instructions that were given. Yes.
Mrs. Ndlovu, it's almost like you're reading my mind because I'm moving now onto those instructions that you were talking about. You made reference a few times in your evidence in chief to the instructions from above.
Yes, Council.
You never challenged these instructions, did you?
We did. We did spoke to the CEO that we do have concerns about where the patients are going. Then the CEO told us, staff, I was told. So let the process continue, because I'm having pressure from above that the patients are coming, So it was like, it was very, very hectic for us. It was, I don't know how to explain the situation. It was not nice. It was not nice. And she too gave us feedback that she's trying her best to communicate this with Dr. Manamela, but it seems as if it doesn't help her. And the CEO, the Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center CEO, was, I don't know if whether I can say was suspended or on precautionary suspension, because I'm not clear on that. We asked ourselves some questions. What happened? What happened? Then the information.
Just make it clearer for the record. You mean the CEO of CRC?
Yes, Mrs. Nyadlu.
When was Mrs. Nyadlu suspended?
I don't have an exact date. I forgot the date, but it was around June. June after
2016.
June 2016, after Anchor has been in the institution.
Mm-hmm.
So the information that we got is that the CEO was suspended. That is the rumors. The CEO was suspended because she didn't want to house Anchor in the premises. Because we only knew about Anchor on the 23rd of June 2016.
And your acting CEO became Mrs. Malaza.
Yes, Judge.
And she's the one who said, we have to do it, these are instructions.
Mrs. Malaza, the instructions that she gave me, it was with the other cases, the one that I've alluded before we can go to our tea break.
Remind me of that.
It was regarding case of Gumede, Tlajwayo,
Yes.
Isaac
Anchor
Tolwane.
people who were not being held by Cullinan Rehabilitation Center.
Please come again, Judge.
I say yes, you told us about how the acting CEO instructed you to find family members of people who had died whilst at Anchor.
Anchor.
Yes.
Yes.
And you were unhappy about that, and you asked her, and she said, why did she tell you why you must do it?
Yes, Judge. Because I'm not employed by Anchor No, Siyabadinga. I'm employed by Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center, as my job description says, under the Department of Health. That is why it created a little bit of tension between me and Mrs. Malaza.
And she said to you, I'm under instructions and so are you, isn't it? In effect, that's what she said to you.
But she didn't put it that way. She didn't put it that way because according to me, she didn't get into my shoes. As I know the ethical codes of a social worker, no one has to intervene in other people's territories. I'm not allowed to interfere with other people's jurisdiction. It was not my jurisdiction to go and trace the families of the patient that were placed in Anchor. Anchor was supposed to have a social worker who must do the tracing for them. But I was instructed, and as an instruction, I took it. I went to the families to inform them about the information of their beloved ones.
Thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Justice. You referred, Mrs. Ndlovu, to the ethical code by which you're bound as a social worker. And that ethical code requires you to protect the best interests of those clients and patients that you're serving.
Yes, Counsel?
Mrs. Ndlovu, you followed those instructions because you feared some kind of discipline from your employer. If you did not?
Exactly, insubordination. I feared that because it was going to seem as if I'm not listening to her.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Ndlovu, I'd like to ask you now, you'll see a set of files next to you. I'd like you to pull up file 7 and go to page 2385.
Which page, Counsel?
Page number 2385.
Thank you.
Yes, Counsel, I
Are
got
you there?
the page. Yes.
Okay. This document is a license that's given to Anchor for the care of mental health care users. Is that correct?
It's my first time seeing the document, Counsel. I'm not familiar with the document.
This is the license, Mrs. Ndlovu. And according to the license, there are, Anchor is permitted to take or authorized to take 150 mental health care users. Earlier, in your evidence in chief and at page 17 of your report that you were referring to, you stated that 163 patients were discharged to Anchor.
No, Counsel, you didn't hear me well.
Okay. If you could clarify.
We've received 163 patients. Our grand total of patients received from Life Esidimeni, it was 163.
Cullinan, you stated, was licensed to take 150 people at a maximum.
Yes, Counsel.
Was there at any stage a group of 163 patients at Cullinan?
Previously, before I can work in Cullinan, they've mentioned that they once had a capacity of 300 patients. But after receiving more than we must have in the institution, the capacity was increased to 300. We ended up last year having 267 patients, if I'm not mistaken, but it is plus minus 267 patients in the institution.
And this was during the marathon project?
Yes, Council.
267 in Cullinan?
Plus minus.
Plus minus.
eh,
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Mrs. Ndlovu, I'm now going to take you to some of the evidence
Well,
of...
before you leave the page
Yes, Justice.
2385, I have a few questions. Is that still, the page still open in front of you? Mendlov,
Judge?
2385, is it still in front of you?
Yes, Judge.
Right. A few questions related to that. Of course, you can see there's a license under the Mental Health Care Act, right?
Yes,
By
Judge.
reading it, you can see that. Now, look at that. It says, this license is issued by the Executive Committee to Management of Anchor House. Anchor House. And it says, at the following address, Kalafong Heights. Can you see that?
I can see, Judge.
In the region of Tshwane. Is your address Kalafong House? And is it in the region of Tshwane?
Our institution, it is in the region of Tshwane, but it is not Kalafong Heights. It is Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center, Sonarvater Road, Cullinan, 1000.
So would a license like this permit them to come and, so to speak, camp at CRC when their official address is Kalafong Heights?
As long as there's nothing that is amended for them to come and be hosted in Cullinan, it seems as if the center was in Cullinan unlawfully.
And do you know any different, any better? This is from paper. It just struck me that the address where they ought to operate is at Kalafong Heights. But we know now from your evidence that they actually came and set up operations at Cullinan Rehabilitation Center.
Yeah, Judge, that is why I'm saying it seems as if they were illegally in our institution according to this document. Hence, I've already mentioned that I got to know them on the 23rd of June, 2016. We were not informed about this before, this NGO before.
Very well, thank you, Counsel.
Thank you, Justice. Mrs. Ndlovu, as I said earlier, I'm now going to take you to some of the evidence that we will be hearing from some of the families of the deceased. I'm going to start off with the family of Charity Rotsotso, who you referred to earlier in your evidence in chief. Now, we'll hear later that Charity's mother, Mrs. Rakoko, she'll testify that Charity was moved from Life Esidimeni to CCRC. Is that correct?
Please come again, Counsel.
Charity Ratsoso was moved from Life Esidimeni to Cullinan.
Yes, Counsel.
Okay. In December 2016, Charity's brother arrived at Cullinan to visit Charity, and they could not find Charity at Cullinan. Is that correct?
Yes, Counsel. However, I was not present on that day, but a phone call, I received a phone call from the institution.
And you phoned Kevin a week later to say that Charity was still missing.
As far as I can remember, Kevin was informed about the relocation of Charity Razozo before Charity can go to Anchor. And maybe the family missed information somewhere, because we've indicated to them that Charity is being placed in Anchor, but that Anchor NGO is in the premises of Kalinen, not outside or around Kalinen, inside the premises. We were using one gate with Anchor and Siabadinga.
So just to clarify, Mrs. Ndlovu, when Kevin came in December 2016 to Cullinan and Charity wasn't there, he wasn't at Cullinan, but you thought that a possibility could be that he had already been moved to Anchor.
Charity was in Cullinan, but not in Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center. In Anchor, he was at Anchor, that is in the premises of Cullinan.
Okay. Okay, so Mrs. Ndlovu, taking us back, you weren't there in December 2016, but you spoke to Kevin a week later to say Charity was not in Cullinan still.
During the visitation of the family, I was not present, because
Yes.
as far as I can remember, the family came on the 16th, if I'm not mistaken. We were not on duty.
Okay.
But answer the question. Did you tell them, did you tell Charity's family that she was not at Cullinan?
We did tell the family before the patient can be transferred to Anchor.
No, we're talking about the day of the visit.
The day of the visit, I was not there, Judge.
It was put to you that a call was made to you, and you advised that Charity was not at, or Ms. Rakoko was not at Cullinan.
Ratsotso.
Ratsotso was not at Cullinan. Do you remember that? Just listen to the question carefully and try and grapple with it with the least detail. Yes, it's Miss Charity Ratsotso. I can see her name on page 7.
I received, yes, a call from one of the nursing staff that were asking if Charity is being discharged somewhere. Then I said, yes, Charity is being discharged to Anchor. The following up with the family, it was not to inform them for the first time. I was telling them that we did call you to inform you that Charity is being discharged to Anchor. So Charity is no longer in Cullinan. He is indeed discharged to Anchor.
Thank you, Counsel.
Perhaps, Mrs. Ndlovu, I can put to you the version of Mrs. Ratsotso and ask you to respond to that. Mrs. Ratsotso will testify that a week after Kevin visited Cullinan, you phoned him to say that Charity was still missing, and that a week after that, you told the family that you would like to visit them at their house. Mrs. Malaza then came to visit them at their house in January 2017 and informed the family that Charity had in fact passed away on the 11th of July 2016. What is your response to that, Mrs. Ndlovu?
Okay,
Did you hear what Counsel put to you?
Yes,
And
yes.
the purpose-
I
Okay,
clearly
okay,
heard
okay,
the
okay,
question,
okay.
Judge.
You're a little animated, Mr. Let's just listen. The purpose of what Counsel has done is to tell you what the family will testify. And the reason is to try and get your responses on each element of that version. Okay. So you heard what they say happened. You've got to respond and say what you know to have happened. Okay.
Okay, Judge.
And just reduce the detail and try and engage with what was put to you.
In front of me, Judge and Counsel, I do have a report that I've written on the day of my visit with the family. Can I read the report for you, Counsel? Or can I just...
Before you do that, certain specific things have been put to you. All that means is Counsel is trying to get your response to each of those elements.
Okay, Judge.
The first part was you phoning the family and saying you want to come and see them sometime and telling them that she is still missing. The second part is when Mrs. Malaza, your CEO acting, went to the house to say she has passed on. Would you just respond to each of those and then you can go to your report?
Counsel, Charity Razozo was admitted in our center on the 12th of May, 2016. He was then discharged to Anchor on the 23rd, 06/2016. Then on the 28th,
Transferred to Anchor when? On the
23rd.
Thank you.
On the 28th,
That's the 23rd of the 5th month, 2016.
I think it's June, Justice.
yeah, 06 is June.
Or June, okay, very well.
On the 28th of June 2016, the Department of Social Work, my department,
Yes.
informed the family, Kevin, about the discharge of Charity.
Yes. Yes, you've answered the
Then
question. The
with-
second part, yes.
With the missing of Razozo, I know nothing about the Information Council.
Yes, in other words, you never told Kevin she is missing. We understand that. And then your CEO, Ms. Malaza, went to the family in January to tell them that she had passed on. That's the other part you have to respond to. Do you know anything about that?
Judge, I'm trying to check again. On the 16th, remember, Council, I told you that the family came on the 16th. I've noted here because I received a call on the 16th of December 2016 from nursing staff, Mr. Pasha, saying that the family are in the premises looking for Charity. I've spoke to Mr. Pasha, then I requested Mr. Pasha to ask the family to leave their contact details so that I can call them on the 19th. That was my request. I didn't say anything about the missing of Razozo. I didn't tell the family on the 19th that Charity is being transferred to Anchor. Then on the 19th, I personally went to Anchor. They were having 2 wards. I went to Ward 1A and Ward 1B. Because I knew that family is waiting for my response about Charity. So I went to the ward to check because I know that the patient is being discharged to Anchor so that I can give information. I can give information to the family about Charity. I went to the ward. When I arrived at the ward, I asked Dorothy, the manager of Anchor, about Charity. Then Dorothy said she doesn't know Charity. Then I said, you know what, the family is looking for this person. Then she said, Daphne, will you please assist me in tracing the whereabouts of Charity. I even went back to my office to take a list of patients that were discharged on the 23rd of June to Dorothy to show her that, ma'am, on this date, we discharged Charity into your care. Then on the 20th,
Did you inform Kevin of that difficulty? There was the difficulty of tracing Charity's presence.
I never went back to the family to call the family again. I told Dorothy that, ma'am, this is your baby. The patient has been discharged into your care. So please, these are the numbers. Contact the family and give the family information about the whereabouts of Charity. I left the matter with Dorothy. Then on the 20th of December 2016, I contacted Dorothy again because she didn't come back to me. I contacted Dorothy to check if whether she has called the family to inform them about the whereabouts of Charity. Then Dorothy said she never called the family. I went to the CEO to tell the CEO that we have discharged so and so to Anchor, and it seems as if now the family is looking for the patient. I've communicated the matter with Dorothy, and Dorothy didn't give me feedback about the whereabouts of Charity.
Well, let's cut to the chase. Did you ever see Charity again before her family was informed that she had passed on?
No.
That should invite a short answer. Did you ever see Ms. Ratsotso again?
Mr. It's Mr.
Mr. Is it
Charity
Mr.?
Ratsotso.
Or
It's
is
a
Charity a
male.
man?
It's a male.
It's a male.
It's a male patient. I
Oh,
know
thank you.
him.
Yes, did you see Mr. Ratsotso? Thank you for correcting me. Did you see Mr. Ratsotso again anytime before the family was informed that he had passed on?
No, Judge.
Okay. Counsel, I think you should proceed.
Thank you, Justice.
Took some time, but we got there.
We got there.
Yes.
If I can just confirm a few details about Charity. You didn't go to Anchor between June 2016 and December 2016. Is that correct?
Sometimes I went to Anchor during the course of December, June, and during the course of June 2016 and December 2016, because my reason to go there, I was giving Dorothy the ID books, the manager of Anchor, ID books of the patients.
And you didn't see Charity at Anchor when you went there to speak to Dorothy?
The other time I went there, I
thought we have answer to
saw
that,
him.
Counsel.
Okay.
It's a bit of a repetition, isn't it?
Thank you, Justice. I'm
We know
sorry,
the
it
answer.
is-
The answer is no,
Yes.
she never did.
Okay.
Very well.
Thank you very much.
No, Judge. After Charity has been admitted in Anchor,
Yes.
the time I went to Anchor to do some logistics, Charity was there. But after a report, after communicating with Dorothy about the tracing of Charity, Charity was not in Anchor. That is what I'm saying.
Okay, she was there sometime and not there.
Yes.
Any longer?
Yes.
But
What I'm saying
from
is
the
that
time
after
you missed her up to her death, you never saw her.
No, Judge.
Yeah, that's your answer. Very well. Counsel, shall we go ahead?
Thank you, Justice. I'd like to now move on to another patient who you referred to in your examination in chief, Joseph Gumede. And we're going to hear later from Ntombi Futi Dladla. If you could please turn, it's in the same file 11, to page 3912, just to refresh your memory if necessary.
Council, can we please finish with charity? Because with charity, there are some other things that you've mentioned about me down there, and they are not correct about my
Well,
name.
you have to look in this direction and ask me, ma'am. If you want to say more things that you have not been asked. What else do you want to say?
She said, Council said, I went to the family to tell the family that charity is missing.
Yes.
The only day that I did went to the family, it was on the 20th of December. Going to check with the family as I was instructed to do so, to check with the family that, not necessarily to check, to give the family information that after inquiring about the whereabouts of charity, there is there were some tracings that happened
Okay, let's do it this way.
within our
I
office.
see. Let's do it this way.
Yes,
Did you go
Judge.
to Mr. Ratsotso's family?
Yes, I did.
What did you tell them?
When I got there, I told the family that we went to Mamelodi with Tsepiso Mola. Tsepiso Mola is the caregiver that was working closely with Charity Ratsotso, because he was involved in this matter because he's the one who took the patient to Mamelodi Hospital. So I went with
Okay, let's try and cut the detail. Let's say, what was your core message to the family? What had you come to tell them?
to inform the family that there is a patient body in Mamelodi Hospital who died on this date, and the patient was admitted as unknown patient in Mamelodi Hospital. So
And was that patient Charity Ratsotso?
I was not sure even today that it is Charity Ratsotso, because I requested the family to meet with me at Mamelodi so that they can identify if whether the patient body is Charity or not. Even now, I don't know if whether the person that was in Mamelodi, unknown patient that was in Mamelodi admitted from Enka, it was Charity or not.
You see, you have to be careful, you and me and all of us, not to drown in detail. The purpose of the things put to you by council ultimately is going to be to show that there wasn't always adequate communication with families. They would often hear about their loved ones once they are dead. That is the core thing that we're trying to go to, man. It's not to try and show that you are untruthful or you didn't do your work. It is to try and examine whether there was the necessary humanity in contacting the families and making sure that they don't hear only when their loved ones are deceased. Do you want to say anything about that? That is really what we are about, and not about the detail.
Okay, I understand, Judge.
You do follow that, eh? Okay, ma'am. Thanks. And there's no diminishing of what you've done. I think if you ask me, I'll tell you what I think at the end here. So I'm not diminishing at all your role as a social worker. But it's important just to listen to the question and try and get to the core that has been put to you. Thank you. Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. Mrs. Ndlovu, we spoke earlier about Joseph Gumede, and you indicated in your evidence in chief that you intervened in this case on the instruction of Mrs. Malaza.
Yes, Counsel.
When did Mrs. Malaza instruct you to intervene?
With case of Gumede, it was this year. Oh, unfortunately, I left my diary, but it was this year. It was 2016.
Okay, perhaps I can frame the question a bit differently if you just give me a moment. Mrs. Ndlovu, Joseph Gumede passed away on the 24th of July, 2016. Did Mrs. Malaza ask you to intervene before or after his passing?
It was after, ma'am.
After his
And,
passing.
and Joseph Gumede, it was anchor patient also.
Okay. Okay. When she comes to testify later, or later on this week, Mrs. Ladler will tell us that she went from pillar to post to look for Joseph and eventually found his name on a list on the 27th of January 2017. And it was at that stage that you intervened and you phoned her to tell her to come to her house and talk to her. Is that correct?
It is correct. I called her with the instruction from Frida Sinelo and Dr. Libete. They called me in the morning, and later on I called the family, because they are the ones who told me that family of Gumede is looking for Gumede. Then it seems as if Gumede was at anchor. Then that's why I intervened through the instruction.
Okay. And when you spoke to Mrs. Leitler, you said that you would come to her house to talk to her. Is that right?
It's correct, Council.
You went to her house on the 10th of February 2017. Is that correct?
I don't remember the date, but indeed I went to her house.
So it was plus minus 10 days or 2 weeks after you spoke to her on the phone.
10 days. No, it was not 10 days. We're talking about Joseph Gumede.
Yes, we are. That's correct.
It was not 10 days. Maybe it can be three to 4 days. Because I apologized. I made an appointment with Mrs. Ladla, and I called her to apologize that, ma'am, today I was supposed to come to meet with you, but I do have some other commitments. I apologize to the family.
Okay. And when you did manage to go to talk to the family, that was when you informed them that Joseph had passed away?
Yes, Council.
But he had died in July already, had he not?
That's correct, Justice.
But the family was informed July 2016, and the family were informed, you say, in January 2017.
February, our client's version is that the family was informed on
Yeah, on
the
your
10th
client's
of
version,
February
February.
2017.
Yeah. What do you say to that? Just for a moment, the facts. Is it died in July? That is an obvious independent fact. 24th July 2016, and the family was informed in February 2017 of the death. Does that sound right?
It doesn't sound right, Judge. If this message were to come to me, somebody telling me that your brother or your husband died 5 to 6 months ago, I'll be very furious with the person.
Yes, but
it was not
is it correct
nice.
on the facts here that you visited the family in February 2017 and he died 24th July 2016?
With this case, it is correct.
It is correct.
It's just that I don't have my dates, but I remember telling the family that the patient passed on long time ago. It is correct.
Do you know why was there that delay?
The patient was placed in anchor, and it was an admission from Life Esidimeni straight to anchor. Joseph Gumede, I don't even know him with my eyes.
So you say it was not in your
Territory.
line of function or your
Yes,
territory.
yes.
Yours was to convey the sad news.
Yes, I was asked to do that.
You're asked to convey the sad news.
Yes.
Counsel?
You did also tell the family, though, Mrs. Ndlovu, that you were arranging or you had arranged for a post-mortem to be conducted. Is that correct?
With the post-mortem, I never said anything about the post-mortem because the patient was not Kalinen's patient.
Okay.
But was the patient buried when you went to inform the family or not? I mean,
The body was still in Mamelodi Hospital because the day the family came to fetch the body, I went to give them support. I was with them.
I see. You may continue, Counsel.
Thank you. I'm going to move on, Mrs. Ndlovu, to Mrs. Anna Mtembu. And in that regard, I'd like you to pick up file 9 from the files that are next to you.
Before you get to file 9, just one moment. This would have been terrible news for this family, isn't it?
Yes, 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 indeed it was, because the lady just went out. She said to me, Ceci, I will kill
She just
you
left
right
this
now.
room where we are in.
Yes, yes. She said
Yes.
to me, you know what? I can kill you right now. I said, Mama, please don't kill the messenger. I was sent to deliver the message.
And was it the first time that the family was hearing that he had passed on?
Yes,
Through
Judge.
you.
Yes, Judge.
And the family was deeply upset, was it?
They were very upset. But at the end, as I was explaining to them that this patient, I don't know him, he was admitted in Anchor, then that's where they tend to calm down and said to me, you know what, Daphne, thank you so much for coming and break this bad news to us.
And has Mr. Gumede in the meantime been buried? Has he found a resting place?
According to the family, as I was checking with them, they told me that Mr. Gumede has been laid to rest.
Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. If I could ask you, Mrs. Ndlovu, to please turn to page 2988 of file 9.
I found the page, Judge.
Okay, I'll just wait for the Justice to find the reference.
Okay.
2988.
Thank you, Counsel.
And this is an affidavit from Anna Mtembu, who lost her sister, Busisiwe Shabalala, in the Marathon Project. Busisiwe was transferred to Cullinan without her medical files. Is that correct?
Busisiwe Chabalala. Without, let me check. Let me check our admission list, because the patients,
You're
those
looking
who
at what?
came,
At the big schedule, are you?
yes.
Thank you.
Busisiwe Chabalala.
Mrs. Ndlovu, there is a picture of Busisiwe's ID document on page 2994, if that would assist you.
No, I can clearly remember or recognize the face, but I just want to check the date of admission of Mrs. Chabalala. Trifina, is it Trifina Chabalala?
Busisiwe Chabalala.
Okay, sorry.
I see that there's in fact a discrepancy between the spelling on the identity document. It's Shabalala, S-H-A.
All right. Okay, cancel. Busisiwe Chabalala.
Where is this on the schedule?
On page 4, sorry, Judge.
Thank you so
Page
much.
4 of our spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Busisiwe Chabalala is our number 32 on the list. Was brought on the 23rd of June 2016. Most of the patients who were brought on the 23rd of June, they were not having medical records and medical, the prescriptions,
And
medication.
she died within a month of her admission, isn't it?
Yes, Judge. I don't know if whether she's one of the patients who did not have medical records or medication. I'm not sure.
Okay, but you have testified, Mrs. Ndlovu, that many patients who arrived at Cullinan on that date didn't have their medical records with them.
Yes, Counsel.
Okay, thank you. On the 25th of July, 2016, you called Mrs. Ntembu to inform her that Busisiwe had passed away. Is that correct?
I don't remember the date, but I've communicated with the family, yes.
Okay. And during that phone call, you said to Mrs. Ntembu that she should come and take her sister's body because the mortuary was full. There was no space at the mortuary. Is that correct?
That information is not correct. What I said to the family is that, ma'am, could you please come and identify first the patient, then we can take it from there. With the storage, our storage, I don't remember if whether it was full or not, but we only have 3 storages in our institution. We can only accommodate 3 corpses in the institution. And Council, by then, we were having plus minus 267 patients in the institution.
And there was space for 3 deceased bodies in the mortuaries.
We have 3 storages.
Okay.
We have only 3 storages, but I don't remember if whether all the storages were full. I don't remember, but what I can remember is that I told the family that we don't have, I told them on their arrival that we don't have enough storage in the institution. But when I called them, I asked them to come and identify first. Then we can take it from there.
Okay. And they arrived to identify. I'd like you to turn, Mrs. Ndlovu, to page 2991.
2991.
1, which is part of Mrs. Ntembu's affidavit. And I'm just going to read a portion from the top of the page to you. It says, I did not see inside the mortuary. I was too stressed. But I could see that it was a very small space and it was not refrigerated. I told Daphne that I would not be able to identify Busisiwe because I was stressed. And she said that it was not her problem if I took the wrong body. The undertaker assisted me to identify Busisiwe. Can you respond to those allegations?
Yes, I can respond, Counsel. Counsel, as like now everybody know that I am a social worker. I'm working and I'm aware of the social well-being and the emotional well-being of the community. I cannot say this word to the families. Each and every time if we have a death in the institution, I'm the first person to be called just to come and give the family counseling, support the family, comfort the family. As a social worker, I don't think these words will come from my mouth.
So what you're saying, Mrs. Ndlovu, is that you would not ordinarily have said those words to Mrs. Ntembu?
I didn't say this kind of words to Mrs. Mutembu.
But you don't remember the exact content of your conversation on that day?
I still remember, she told me, I told him that, ma'am, let's go to the mortuary. After breaking the news, then I said, let's go to the mortuary. Then she said, Daphne, I'm afraid. Then I said, ma'am, do you know that if you can take a wrong body, it's going to be my problem. So it's better if you can just gain strength so that we go and you identify the body. Because I didn't want to cause that thing of calling a family for somebody that is not theirs. That is why I've asked and request Mrs. Mutembu to be strong so that she can go and identify her sister.
Okay. I'd like you to turn, Mrs. Ndlovu, to page 3003, 3003. And this is the death notice of Busisiwe Chabalala. And you'll see halfway down the page, about halfway at paragraph 77, the cause of death is listed as it's listed as hypothermia caused by severe dehydration.
I can see that, Council.
I'd like to ask you some questions about the environment at Cullinan, if I may. How many meals did the mental health care users receive on a daily basis?
In the morning, it's four meals, because in the morning, they get their breakfast. Then at around 11 is their lunchtime.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mrs. Ndlovu, but perhaps you can tell us what they had for breakfast, what they had for lunch, what they had for each meal, what they ate for each meal.
When I passed through the wards, in the morning before I can get to work, in the morning, Council, before I can get to work, they are early morning tea. I don't know what do they get, but around 8 o'clock is tea and tea bread, oats, if it's oats, porridge, if it's porridge. Then for lunch, they get full course meal, composed of vegetables. If there's starch, then it's starch. Protein, then there's protein. Then in the afternoon, they do have breakfast, not breakfast, they do have a tea in the afternoon before I can leave work at around 4. They gathered in the kitchen and have something to eat. Then in the evening, I don't know if what time are they getting, but there is something that they are getting in the evening, around 8, if I'm not mistaken.
And you don't know what the contents are of those meals, Mrs. Ndlovu?
In the evening, I cannot say because I'll be away in the institution. But during the day, I usually see their food. I usually see them when I go to the wards.
And you testified earlier that there were plus minus 267 mental health care users at Cullinan.
Yes, Council?
And that Cullinan was licensed to take 150 mental health care users.
Yes, Council?
And so I'd like you to respond, Mrs. Ndlovu, to the proposition that because there was almost double the number of patients as there should have been,
Yes, Council?
there wasn't enough food and water for all of these patients.
No, there was food, there was water for the patients, Council. There was food, there was water for the patients. Because after receiving many patients, we didn't experience shortage of food for the patients. We didn't experience that.
Can you perhaps then assist us with the link, Mrs. Ndlovu, between this situation and the record of severe dehydration in Busisiwe's death notice?
This one, Council, I think maybe nursing will be the relevant people to answer it. Because I'm not giving medication, I'm not giving food. The nurses maybe might
What is
answer
hypothermia?
this.
What is hypothermia?
Hypothermia, Judge, it's a medical term. I also don't know it, Judge. I
But-
am a social worker. I'm not familiar with these terms, Judge.
What is severe dehydration?
According to my knowledge, if we're talking about dehydration, it seems as if somebody's not getting enough water.
And or food that would contain liquids,
Yes, Judge.
isn't it?
Yes, Judge.
So if you either don't get water or you don't get food that contains liquid, will that lead to severe dehydration? You see, all that counsel is putting to you, doesn't want you to be a medical expert. She's saying to you, how do we draw the line between death through dehydration on the one end and all the food that you say was available at the institution? That is a core thing, really. Aside all the detail, how does one explain that? And you are one of the caregivers, professional caregivers there. What's your response?
My response, Judge, on this one, hence I've already mentioned. To me, it seems as if this patient was not getting enough water. But maybe the doctor,
Or food with liquid content?
yes, Judge, but the doctor who examined the patient maybe can give more explanation than me.
Were there instances of shortage of food at the institution that you became aware of?
No, not at all, Judge. We didn't experience shortage of water in the institution, nor shortage of food in the institution. That one I can confirm.
And I noticed that the patient was born in 1964. We look at her identity number.
Yes, Judge.
And why brought to Cullinan when the patient is from Soweto? I can see from the affidavit, this is a person from Zola in Soweto who would have been in Waverley or Randfontein, nearer to Soweto. Do you know why would it be good for the patient to be moved to Cullinan? Further away from family.
Judge, these patients, when they were discharged from Life Esidimeni, it seems as if the people who were discharging them didn't consider the location of the patients. That one I can acknowledge, because more of our patients are coming from south.
And how long,
Dobsonville, Zakane, Brakpan, Soweto, more of our patients are coming from this side of southern Johannesburg.
and they were properly and more conveniently housed and taken care of at Esidimeni, isn't it? Nearer their homes.
Yes, Judge. That is why I'm saying the criteria that they've used to discharge the patient, they didn't consider their location according to my perception.
Mr. Ratsotso survived for a month after the discharge. Mr. Joseph Gumede, how long was he with you before he died?
Mr. Gumede, if I can recall well, it was a straight discharge from Life Esidimeni to Anchor, if I can recall well.
You see, he died on the 1st of May 2016. That's pretty close to the transfer, isn't it? Let's look at the schedule. Can your counsel find his name on Exhibit ELAH 11?
I am looking at the schedule. Justice, the report entitled Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Centre on page 23, the second last entry indicates that Joseph Gumede was admitted straight from Life Esidimeni to Anchor.
Admitted when?
I'm sorry there.
On page 23, counsel.
Yes, it doesn't have a date.
Yes, I can see that. But what is 24/7/2016? What date is that?
As I understand that, Justice, if I can just check,
Is the date of death?
that was the
counsel?
date of death, yes.
Judge.
So the affidavit has a different date from that one. The affidavit says 1 May 2016.
I think we're talking about different deceased here, Justice.
Oh, I see.
So the affidavit of Anna Mtembu, who refers to Busisiwe Shabalala,
Where's Busisiwe Shabalala's affidavit?
2988 is the affidavit of Busisiwe's sister, Mrs. Mtembu.
Yes. I'm just exploring I've got that. 25th July, 27th, thank you.
Counsel,
The possibility of somebody being admitted to an institution within a month or two, they die of dehydration. I'm just trying to work out how does that happen? Do you have an idea? Can you help us understand that?
in case of is it Busisiwe? Because if we're talking about Busisiwe, she's the one that was admitted on the 23rd of 6/2016. And I've already mentioned that some of the patients that came on the 23rd of June 2016 were not having their medical records nor the medication with them. I'm not trying maybe to justify Cullinan, but Busisiwe might be one of them who came without medical records and medication.
Mrs. Ndlovu,
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Justice. I'd like to put to you, though, that Busisiwe's cause of death had little to do with her prescription medication. If I could take you back to page 3003, we've spoken about severe dehydration and you've spoken about a possible lack of water or food containing water, and the immediate cause of death was hypothermia, which appears to be related to winter conditions and insufficient warmth for the patients.
Yes, Council.
Could you respond to that, please?
Council, if we're talking about Busisiwe, again, Busisiwe is the patient that came on the 23rd June 2016, of which I might not say she came without medication. Maybe she can be one of the patients who came without medication and medical records.
My proposition to you, Mrs. Ndlovu, is that the severe dehydration and the hypothermia recorded on the death notice had little or nothing to do with the absence of medical records.
I've already indicated that in our institution, we never experienced a problem of not having water or food for the patients. So this one, I don't want to defend myself. I don't want to defend I don't want to defend the institution. I cannot answer for this one. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ndlovu. Justice, I have one more set of questions to ask Mrs. Ndlovu. I see that it is 1:30. I'll be guided by you as to whether to ask them now or after the lunch adjournment.
It's a set of questions, or is it a question?
It's not a question. It will likely take longer than a few minutes, Justice.
No, then certainly we would take the adjournment now. I have indicated to you who else will be asking you questions after this, but Council will have a few questions followed by, indeed, by more questions from other advocates. We hope to help you away sometime this afternoon, but thank you for being here and being available after lunch.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes, indeed. We're going to adjourn now until 2:30 for an hour, 1:30 to 2:30. We are adjourned.
On picture as soon as they see the frame. yenye packet. Sankhona. I'm back. One, two, 1, 2. Bacela ukhuphule volume. 1, 2, 1, 2. 3, 4, 5. Sharp. Huh? No, sharp. Good afternoon to you and to our viewers at home. Yes, indeed, this is day 6 of the proceedings, and we have had social worker from Cullinan Rehabilitation Center, Ms. Stephanie Ndlovu, giving us a testimony of what happened from their side as a rehabilitation center. She says that Cullinan is actually designed to cater for 150 patients, but during that process, they had to take on more because they were getting instructions from their seniors who refused to heed the call that taking on more than enough or more patients than they could actually house was going to be dangerous. However, they had to take on more than they had to. She also mentions that she had to deliver some of the messages to the families that their loved ones have passed on, which made her job very difficult. And when the justice kept on asking her, why did it happen, she said it was very difficult for them to say no at the time because they were receiving instructions. She says that they spoke to their CEO that they cannot take on a certain number. She says that at some point they went to Waverley, which is part of Life Esidimeni, to take on 10 patients, but they were told to take on 26 because they came with a bus. So it became quite hard for them to actually say no at that time because they were receiving pressure from superiors or people who hold positions that are above them. And as a social worker, they are only limited to certain duties and responsibilities. So it was quite hard for them to actually say no. She says that some family members were actually notified of their loved ones passing on a couple of months later after the whole incident happened. So it was quite an emotional morning as well, with family members moving or leaving the room as their testimonies were being read by Section 27 lawyer, advocate Stein, putting to the social workers what some of the experiences of the families were during the time of the Life Esidimeni move. Proceedings have taken an adjournment until 2:30. What is going to happen after now, Ms. Ndlovu is going to be cross-questioned or cross-examined by Section 27 advocate Stein, and we're still waiting for legal SA to also cross-examine her, and also the state lawyer who's also going to be asking her questions. But what we can expect during the week is more family members who are going to give an account as to what happened. Remember, some of them only found out about their family members or their loved ones having passed on months later. Others were not notified of the move from Life Esidimeni to various NGOs. Ms. Ndlovu did mention that some patients did come with contact details and the families were notified. Some did not, so they had to move them because of the pressure that was put on them by their superiors. Thank you. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, excuse, yeah, sure.
What's the excuse about?
Eh?
What's the excuse about? Only excuse you should for.
But isandla sami siklapha uMike as I talk. Senza Thank you.
Oh yes, you don't share it.
So I did forget.
Doing that. Sunday distance.
That's what it is.
one waste name. Kagiso. Yeah. Take the pay. Where's my phone? I left it there.
I want to know what's here so that I don't get up.
Leave everything.
7, 9, and what's that? 11.
Yeah. Where's my phone? Did I leave it there?
Yeah, because I was lashed and there was no one here. It's not right, guys. Because I'm standing here preparing for my lives. I shouldn't be running after people. It's not right at all. Well, certainly, Jeremy, today we've been listening to the testimony of a social worker who worked at the Cullinan Rehabilitation and Care Center, who's basically been detailing to the hearings of how they were forced to move patients out of the center to accommodate the Life Esidimeni patients. And she explained that this was not normal and they did this against their will, but they were told that this instruction is coming from above and therefore they have to do it. She's also explained how patients came to the rehabilitation center with no proper medical records. They came with no identification. So for many patients, they couldn't really inform their families that they were indeed at that center. Well, she's explained that there are certain forms that patients have to fill out prior to being moved to different centers. And she's explained that the patients that came from the Life Esidimeni centers did have transfer forms, but for many of them, there wasn't any identification. There wasn't any periodic assessment of their well-being that was available to the centers to ensure that they do receive the correct medical care for whatever condition that they were going through. But she's also explicitly been emphasizing about this instruction that came from above. She says that they did raise concern with the CEO of the center, that they are not happy that they have to forcefully move patients out of the center, and that does not go in line with the laws that they've learned in terms of applying their jobs, as well as patients that were coming from the Life Esidimeni Center. Some of them, there were just too many for the new center to accommodate, but the CEO simply told them that this instruction is coming from above, so therefore we have to follow it. Judge Museneka is saying that he understands that this instruction came from above, but how would she have acted if she could do anything about it? And she simply said she would not have forcefully moved people out of the center or tried to accommodate more people in that center than that center could accommodate. We do understand that that center can accommodate up to 150 patients, but she's told the hearings today that at some point they had more than 200 patients at the center, which means people couldn't really receive the adequate care that they need for their conditions. She says that they didn't do justice to the patients. They didn't give them the care that they knew that each of those patients needed for their conditions. Certainly, Jeremy, but the social worker has said that she was not in charge of giving patients food or giving them water, because she's a social worker, but nurses, and maybe they'll come testify in these hearings later, will be able to give those kind of details. But we've heard here testimony from Section 27, rather, Jeremy, saying that in some of the post-mortems, some patients did die as a result of dehydration. Judge Museneke is shocked at the fact that a patient was taken to the center within a space of 2 months. 2 months, that patient died, and in their report, post-mortem report, it says they died from dehydration. We've also had testimony from the social worker that one patient died in July last year, Jeremy, on the 24th of July last year, but the family was only informed in February this year. So all those months, the family did not know where their loved one is. But Judge Museneke said he wants to come back to this point. He wants to come back to this point of whether do the families care for their loved ones once they are in these centers. And he says he's going to interrogate the social worker more about how regularly do families visit their loved ones at these centers. And she said that she really wants to talk about that because they do have a huge problem with regards to that matter. But we've also seen it's been very tense, very emotionally tense. Families, a lot of family members, Jeremy, have had to leave the room in tears, sharing testimonies of how their loved ones were treated after they were dead. We heard a testimony of a woman from Section 27 saying that they went to a hospital to identify their loved one, and when they got there, they weren't put in a fridge, but they were dead. And when she told the social worker, the specific one that's testifying today, that she doesn't feel strong enough to identify the body, the social worker allegedly told her that she has to gain the strength because if she does not identify the body, it's not her responsibility if she takes home the wrong body. Now, the social worker has disputed that, saying that as a social worker, she really can't be saying those kind of words to someone. She just told the person to gain strength so that they can identify their loved one and give them a dignified burial.